In March 2010, the lifeless body of 2-year-old Jamie Morton was found in the backyard pool of his family home in suburban Pennsylvania. An investigation uncovered the devastating history of betrayal and neglect in the Morton household. In October 2009, at a prestigious marketing firm in downtown Pennsylvania, a secret affair between Adrian Morton and his co-worker Nicole Harris set off a chain of events that would ultimately end in heartbreak and tragedy. In 2008, Adrian and Claire Morton moved into their dream home in a quiet suburb of Pennsylvania. The house, a charming 2-story, with a white picket fence and sprawling backyard, symbolized everything they had worked hard to achieve. Adrian's career in marketing was flourishing. At just 36 years old, he had climbed the corporate ladder faster than most, becoming a senior executive at a prestigious firm. Known for his charismatic personality and sharp mind, Adrian was often described by friends and colleagues as someone destined for greatness. Claire, 34, was once a talented artist with big dreams of showcasing her paintings in galleries. She had met Adrian in 1999 at an art exhibit where her work was featured. Their connection had been instant, their relationship built on mutual admiration, her creativity and his drive. But as Adrian's career took off, Claire put her artistic ambitions on hold to support him. By the time their son Jamie was born in 2008, she had fully embraced the role of a stay-at-home mother, pouring all her energy into their family. Jamie Morton was the glue that initially held the Mortons together. With his bright blue eyes and a laugh that could light up a room, Jamie became the center of Claire's world. From the moment he was born, Claire devoted herself to his care, creating a warm and nurturing environment for him. Every morning, she would sit Jamie in his high chair in their sunlit kitchen, feeding him homemade purees while humming soft lullabies. Her days revolved around Jamie, and though she missed painting, she found joy in motherhood. Adrian, on the other hand, was a distant father. Though he loved his son in his way, his demanding career left little time for family. On weekdays, he was out of the house by 6:30 a.m. and often didn't return until late in the evening. Weekends were supposed to be for family, but Adrian frequently brought work home or used the time to network. Claire noticed that he rarely joined them for breakfast or Jamie's bedtime routine. As the months passed, his absences became more noticeable, and Claire began to feel the strain of single-handedly raising their son. By 2009, their marriage had grown cold. Adrian was no longer the attentive husband Claire had married. Conversations between them became transactional, about groceries, bills, or Jamie's doctor's appointments. Adrian seemed preoccupied, often scrolling through emails on his phone, even when they were in the same room. Claire, yearning for connection, tried to rekindle their bond. She planned date nights and left him handwritten notes, but her efforts were met with indifference. The harder she tried, the more distant Adrian became. In the fall of 2009, Adrian met Nicole Harris, a vibrant 29-year-old who had recently joined his firm. Nicole was ambitious and strikingly confident, with an energy that captivated everyone in the office. Adrian, craving excitement and validation, found himself drawn to her. At first, their interactions were professional, but subtle flirtations soon crept into their conversations. By December, their relationship had escalated into a full-blown affair. Adrian began spending more time at work, claiming he had pressing deadlines and late-night meetings. In reality, he was with Nicole, meeting her at upscale restaurants or her downtown apartment. Nicole made Adrian feel alive again, feeding his ego in a way Claire no longer could. The affair gave him an escape from the mundane responsibilities of family life, a secret world where he could forget his shortcomings as a husband and father. Claire noticed the changes almost immediately. Adrian started coming home even later than usual, his suits faintly smelling of unfamiliar perfume. His phone, once casually left on the counter, was now always in his pocket or face down on the table. Claire's suspicions grew, but she lacked concrete evidence and, deep down, wanted to believe that Adrian would never betray her. Instead, she buried her unease, focusing all her energy on Jamie. The morning of March 14th, 2010, started like any other Sunday. Claire was exhausted, having stayed up late organizing Jamie's second birthday photos into an album. Adrian was away on yet another business trip, though Claire suspected he was with Nicole. She had stopped asking him to stay home. The arguments that followed were too draining. Jamie, energetic as always, toddled around the house, clutching his favorite stuffed rabbit. By 2 p.m., Claire felt the weight of her sleepless night catching up to her. Jamie had just finished lunch, a messy affair involving spaghetti and sauce smeared across his tiny face. Claire cleaned him up and set him in his playpen with a few toys. She decided to rest on the couch for just a minute. Exhaustion quickly took over, and she drifted into a light sleep. It was during this brief nap that Jamie wandered outside. The sliding door to the backyard had been left slightly ajar earlier when Claire was airing out the house. Curious and adventurous, Jamie toddled toward the pool, a place he loved to watch reflections dance on the water's surface. The pool, uncovered and unfenced, posed a silent danger, a detail Adrian had promised to address months earlier, but never followed through on. At 2:37 p.m., the neighbor, Mrs. Wiggins, saw something that made her stomach drop. Peering through her kitchen window, she noticed Jamie's small body floating motionless in the pool. She rushed over, screaming for Claire, who woke up to the sound of pounding on her door. Panic set in as Claire followed Mrs. Wiggins to the backyard, where the sight of Jamie's lifeless body shattered her world. Paramedics arrived at the 2:50 p.m., but it was too late. Jamie was pronounced dead on the scene, the cause of death officially listed as drowning. Claire's screams echoed through the neighborhood, her anguish palpable. She clutched Jamie's lifeless body, unable to let go, as the paramedics gently tried to take him away. Adrian returned late that evening, his face pale as he entered the house. He had received Claire's frantic calls but arrived hours after the tragedy, citing delayed flights. When he saw Claire sitting on the floor, clutching Jamie's stuffed rabbit, he muttered hollow words of condolence before retreating to their bedroom. There was no embrace, no shared grief, just an unbearable silence. In the days following Jamie's death, Claire was a shadow of herself. She stopped eating, barely slept, and spent hours staring at Jamie's empty crib. Adrian, meanwhile, threw himself into work, avoiding the house as much as possible. Claire couldn't comprehend how he could be so detached, so unaffected by the loss of their son. She blamed him for everything, for being absent, for neglecting their family, for the uncovered pool that had taken Jamie's life. By March 20th, 2010, Claire's grief turned into rage. She saw Adrian's continued absences as proof that he had never truly cared. Her love for him was replaced by a burning hatred, one that consumed her thoughts and began to shape her actions. In her mind, Adrian's betrayal extended beyond his affair. It was his neglect and indifference that had stolen Jamie from her. This marked the beginning of Claire's transformation, a shift from grief-stricken mother to a woman plotting the ultimate revenge. By the April 2010, Claire Morton was a shell of her former self. The days after Jamie's death were spent in unbearable silence. Her once vibrant home was now filled with haunting reminders of her son. His toys were untouched in the corner of the living room. His high chair sat at the kitchen table, and his laughter, which once echoed through the halls, was replaced by an emptiness that suffocated her. Adrian, instead of offering comfort, had thrown himself deeper into work and his affair with Nicole. His avoidance only deepened Claire's wounds. In the months that followed, Claire's grief morphed into rage. She replayed the events of that fateful day in her mind endlessly, each time focusing on Adrian's absence. He should have been home. He should have helped her watch Jamie. She began to view Adrian not as the grieving father he pretended to be in front of others, but as the man who chose his mistress over his family. By October 2010, Claire's anger became consuming. She stopped attending her art group, withdrew from her friends, and even stopped visiting her parents. Instead, she spent her days alone, poring through books and the internet about psychology, grief, and eventually, revenge. She learned about the slow erosion of trust in relationships and read chilling accounts of calculated acts of vengeance. The idea of retribution took root, and the thought of holding Adrian accountable for his actions gave her a twisted sense of purpose. By January 2011, Claire's thoughts turned to how she could make Adrian suffer. She researched ways to punish him, carefully combing through articles, forums, and even crime documentaries for inspiration. Her meticulous nature as an artist now served a darker purpose. Eventually, she settled on poisoning, a method she believed would be slow, untraceable, and fitting for the way Adrian had poisoned their marriage and family. Claire discovered that arsenic, often referred to as the silent killer, could be easily obtained through gardening supplies. In March 2011, she made her first discreet purchase, a small bag of rat poison from a local hardware store. Over the next year, she continued to purchase similar supplies, ensuring she never bought from the same store twice to avoid suspicion. In her kitchen, the same space where she once lovingly prepared meals for Jamie, Claire experimented with small doses of arsenic, dissolving it into water and observing how it blended seamlessly. She stored the mixture in an unmarked jar, hidden in the back of her pantry. The act of preparing it was chillingly mundane, a sharp contrast to the deadly intent behind it. By the time early 2012 arrived, Claire had fully committed to her plan. The family's annual Thanksgiving reunion was the ideal stage for her act of vengeance. It would bring together all the people Adrian respected and sought validation from: his parents, his siblings, and their extended family. Claire saw it as an opportunity to expose him, not just as an unfaithful husband, but as the negligent father whose choices had cost Jamie his life. In October 2012, Claire proposed the idea of hosting the Thanksgiving dinner. She framed it as an effort to bring the family closer together after years of tension. Adrian, oblivious to her true intentions, agreed, even offering to invite his parents and colleagues. Claire played the part of the devoted wife flawlessly, ensuring no one suspected the storm brewing beneath her composed exterior. The weeks leading up to Thanksgiving were spent meticulously planning every detail. Claire prepared the menu, ensuring Adrian's favorite dishes were included. She cleaned the house obsessively, decorating it with warm autumnal tones and photographs of Jamie, creating a false sense of nostalgia and unity. Her outward calm masked the turmoil and cold determination within. On November 22, 2012, family members arrived at the Morton home, greeted by the scent of roasted turkey and spiced cider. Claire had gone to great lengths to create a welcoming atmosphere, lighting candles and playing soft music in the background. She moved through the room gracefully, her polite smiles and small talk concealing the weight of her plan. Adrian basked in the attention, laughing loudly as he shared stories of his latest work accomplishments, his charm as effortless as ever. Dinner was served at 6 p.m. The table was a picture of perfection, adorned with golden napkins, crystal glasses, and steaming platters of food. As the family passed dishes around, Claire felt a cold sense of control. She had carefully prepared Adrian's plate in the kitchen, sprinkling a fine layer of arsenic over his mashed potatoes before serving it with precision. At 7:15 p.m., as the meal wound down and dessert was being served, Claire stood at the head of the table. The room quieted, all eyes turning to her. She began by thanking everyone for coming, her voice steady and composed. But as she continued, her words shifted. She spoke about Jamie, his life, and the pain of his absence. Her voice trembled slightly as she described the grief that had consumed her for the past 2 years. The room grew heavy with emotion, family members dabbing at their eyes. Then, in a chilling twist, Claire pivoted to Adrian. She described his infidelity with Nicole, laying bare every sordid detail. She referenced dates, locations, and even displayed printed emails and photographs she had secretly collected over the years. Gasps filled the room, and Adrian's confident demeanor crumbled. Family members exchanged shocked glances, unable to process the betrayal. Claire's tone grew sharper as she recounted the events leading up to Jamie's death. She accused Adrian of negligence, emphasizing how his weekend trips with Nicole had left Jamie vulnerable and unprotected. She described the moment she found Jamie's lifeless body, her voice devoid of emotion, but her words cutting deeply. Adrian sat frozen, his face pale, and his hands trembling. Finally, Claire revealed the climax of her plan. She calmly announced that Adrian's food had been poisoned. She described how she had spent years planning this moment, ensuring that he would experience the same helplessness and pain she had felt. Adrian began to cough violently, clutching his chest as his body betrayed him. Family members screamed and scrambled for their phones to call 911, but it was too late. Adrian collapsed, his breathing shallow, his eyes wide with terror. By the time paramedics arrived at 7:45 p.m., Adrian was pronounced dead at the scene. The room descended into chaos. Family members sobbed, some shouted in disbelief, while others stared at Claire in shock. Claire, now calm and eerily composed, sat down at the table, her hands folded neatly in her lap. For the first time in 2 years, she felt a sense of closure, even as police officers arrived to take her away. On the evening of November 22nd, 2012, just hours after Adrian Morton's dramatic collapse at the Thanksgiving dinner table, the police arrived at the Morton home. The chaotic scene was lit by the red and blue flashing lights of emergency vehicles. Family members were huddled outside, some crying hysterically, others stunned into silence. In the middle of the turmoil, Claire sat alone on the front steps, her hands resting calmly in her lap. When the officers approached, she rose slowly, her face devoid of emotion. She didn't resist as they handcuffed her, nor did she ask any questions. Instead, she simply stated that she was ready to leave. The officers were unnerved by Claire's composure. Most suspects they encountered were frantic, tearful, or defiant. Claire, however, remained eerily calm, as if she had already prepared herself for this moment. At the station, she confessed to the murder without hesitation. She detailed her actions, the years of planning, the arsenic in Adrian's mashed potatoes, and her reasons for doing it. Her tone was detached, almost clinical, as if recounting someone else's story. The detectives, though experienced, found themselves shaken by her lack of remorse. As the interrogation progressed into the early hours of November 23, 2012, Claire's motives became clear. She described the betrayal of Adrian's affair, the negligence that led to Jamie's death, and the overwhelming grief that consumed her in the years that followed. While some officers saw her as a cold-blooded killer, others couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for the broken woman sitting across from them. By the November 24, 2012, news of the Thanksgiving murder spread like wildfire. Local headlines screamed phrases like "family dinner turns deadly" and "wife's deadly revenge." As the details of Claire's confession emerged, national outlets picked up the story, dubbing her the Thanksgiving Widow. The public was captivated by the chilling nature of the crime, the meticulous planning, the dramatic family confrontation, and the ultimate act of vengeance. Talk shows debated whether Claire was a villain or a victim. Some portrayed her as a grieving mother pushed to the edge by her husband's betrayal and neglect, while others condemned her as a calculating murderer who chose violence over healing. True crime enthusiasts dissected every detail, from her online search history to the way she calmly handed herself over to the police. In the weeks that followed, reporters swarmed the Morton family and their neighbors. Adrian's parents, once proud of their son's success, were now grappling with the public revelation of his infidelity and negligence. They avoided interviews, retreating into their home, their grief compounded by the shame of his actions. Meanwhile, Nicole Harris, Adrian's former mistress, was thrust into the spotlight. Her career as a rising star in marketing crumbled overnight. Colleagues distanced themselves, and clients withdrew their business. By December 2012, Nicole had left her job and moved out of state, disappearing from public view. The Mortons' extended family, who had witnessed the murder firsthand, were left reeling. Adrian's siblings struggled to reconcile the brother they loved with the man whose actions had led to such tragedy. Some blamed Claire for tearing the family apart, while others quietly acknowledged Adrian's role in Jamie's death and Claire's unraveling. Family gatherings became fraught with tension, the shadow of that fateful Thanksgiving hanging over every interaction. Claire's parents, who had been close to Adrian, were devastated. They visited her in jail once, shortly after her arrest, but the encounter was strained. They couldn't understand how the daughter they had raised to be kind and compassionate could commit such a horrific act. By the end of 2013, their visits ceased entirely, leaving Claire to navigate her new reality alone. The police wasted no time building their case. By the November 23, 2012, forensic teams had recovered arsenic traces from Claire's kitchen and pantry. They also uncovered her extensive online search history, which included phrases like undetectable poisons and how much arsenic is lethal. The evidence painted a clear picture of premeditation. On December 15, 2012, Nicole Harris was brought in for questioning. Though shaken, she corroborated Claire's claims of an affair with Adrian. Nicole admitted that their relationship had been ongoing for nearly 3 years, but denied any knowledge of Claire's plans or involvement in Adrian's murder. By January 2013, the prosecution was ready to proceed, confident they had enough evidence to secure a conviction. Claire's trial began on March 10, 2013, in a packed courtroom. The prosecution painted her as a cold-blooded killer who had meticulously planned her husband's death for years. They presented evidence of her arsenic purchases, her internet searches, and her calm confession. They argued that, while her grief was understandable, her actions were unjustifiable. The defense, however, focused on Claire's mental state. They described her as a grieving mother who had been driven to the brink by years of emotional neglect and betrayal. Expert witnesses testified about the impact of Jamie's death on Claire's psyche, arguing that her actions stemmed from a diminished capacity to process her emotions. Throughout the trial, Claire remained stoic. She never cried, never reacted to the testimonies, and never attempted to defend herself. Some saw this as a sign of her guilt. Others believed it reflected her acceptance of the consequences. On March 24, 2013, after 2 weeks of testimony and only 4 hours of deliberation, the jury found Claire guilty of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The verdict was met with mixed reactions. Some felt justice had been served, while others believed the sentence was too harsh given the circumstances. In prison, Claire became a figure of morbid curiosity. Her case had attracted so much attention that even her fellow inmates recognized her as the Thanksgiving widow. Some admired her audacity, viewing her as a woman who had taken control in the face of unbearable pain. Others shunned her, disgusted by the murder of her husband. By 2015, Claire had settled into the routine of prison life. She spent her days working in the library, reading books about grief and loss, and occasionally sketching, though her art now carried a darker tone. Adrian's name, once synonymous with professional success, became a cautionary tale. His affair and negligence overshadowed his achievements, and the Mortons became infamous for the tragedy that had unfolded in their family. Claire's actions, while condemned, were often framed as a grim reflection of the pain Adrian had caused. In 2014, friends and family set up a memorial fund in Jamie's name to support child safety programs. It became a way for those who loved him to honor his short life. From prison, Claire wrote to the fund organizers expressing regret, not for her crime, but for the loss of her son. It was the only time she allowed herself to show vulnerability, her grief for Jamie remaining the one part of her humanity she refused to let go. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss our daily updates. And if you're intrigued by tales of shocking betrayals, check out the jaw-dropping case where a wife exposed her husband's secret affair with a coworker during a family reunion. Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.